Imagine standing in a burial pit located in modern-day Iraq inside the ancient city of Ur. It is 4,500 years old, and you are surrounded by dozens of bodies. They aren't scattered in a panic, they are meticulously arranged. A woman wears a striking headdress crafted from gold and lapis lazuli. Soldiers lie in pristine rows beside their weapons, while musicians rest perfectly next to their instruments, their fingers still curved as if caught mid-song. This was not an isolated tragedy. By the end of this video, you are going to discover how 5 completely disconnected ancient civilizations, separated by oceans and thousands of years, all independently invented the exact same terrifying ritual. You will see the precise moment in history when humanity realized that fear was the ultimate tool for control. Welcome back to Stickilo. Today, we are exploring the cruelest math problem our species ever solved. For nearly a century, the narrative surrounding this site in Ur was strangely gentle, loyal attendants willingly drinking poison to follow their queen into the afterlife. But in 2009, a paradigm shift occurred. Researchers ran 2 of the skulls through a CT scanner and discovered the truth. There was no poison. Instead, they found evidence of a single deliberate blow to the skull. Afterward, the bodies had been heated and preserved with a mercury compound to prevent decay before the final funeral rites. These people didn't volunteer. They were executed, preserved, and put on display. This brings us to a profoundly uncomfortable question. Who was the first human being in history to decide that another person's life could be spent as currency for a ritual? And how did society simply stand by and let it happen? Here is the first major twist. If you look far back enough, this behavior almost entirely disappears. Homo sapiens have existed for roughly 300,000 years, and for the overwhelming majority of our timeline, there is virtually no evidence of organized human sacrifice. That should feel strange, because early humans were undeniably violent. At a site called Gebel Sahaba in Sudan, archaeologists uncovered an entire community massacred along the Nile over 13,000 years ago. Bodies were left exactly where they fell, with arrow wounds driven into spines and skulls caved in. Violence is ancient, but sacrifice is an entirely different mechanism. It is killing with an attached purpose, killing that is supposed to hold metaphysical meaning. And for almost the entire span of our species, that specific concept barely existed. So what changed? Before we answer that, we must understand how archaeologists differentiate between a simple murder and a sacrifice. The answer is repetition. A single crushed skull could be combat, an accident, or an execution, but when the same method appears repeatedly, the exact same hand positioning, body orientation, and ceremonial setting, it is no longer chaos. It becomes a liturgy. It is the fingerprint of a society acting on purpose, on a rigid schedule, and with strict rules. And once you know what that fingerprint looks like, you start seeing it everywhere. Around 12,000 years ago, as the Ice Age ended, humanity did something unprecedented. We stopped moving. For 300,000 years, survival meant mobility. If food vanished or danger arose, you simply relocated. Now, people began to build, plant, and store grain. They put down literal roots. It looked like progress, but it carried a terrifying cost. Survival became anchored to a single coordinate. A drought or a flood wasn't something you could walk away from anymore. It was an existential threat you had to endure. Life became remarkably fragile, and this is exactly where human psychology takes a dark turn. When people lose physical control over their circumstances, they desperately seek control over meaning. The human brain despises randomness, especially when survival is on the line, so it hunts for patterns. Imagine being an early farmer, watching your crops die for 2 consecutive seasons. Then you perform an unfamiliar ritual and the rain miraculously returns. You don't know it's a coincidence, you just know the ritual worked. Slowly, suffering stopped being random and became negotiable. At first, the negotiations were small, offerings of grain, animals, or carved tools. But eventually, in completely unconnected pockets of the globe, humanity independently arrived at the same horrifying thought. What if none of this is enough? What if the only offering valuable enough to tip the cosmic scales is a human life? This was not a moral decision. It was a survival calculation. This is where the archaeological record begins to scream. In Brazil, at Lapa do Santo, researchers found a 9,000-year-old burial where a skull and 6 neck vertebrae were cleanly severed with amputated hands deliberately placed over the face. In Sudan, a 5,500-year-old tomb revealed a central figure surrounded by 3 sacrificed individuals and 2 dogs laid out with chilling precision. And in 2024, researchers confirmed that women in Europe were subjected to slow, ritualistic strangulation around 5400 BCE, a practice that persisted unchanged for 2,000 years. 3 disconnected continents, the identical impulse surfacing from the dark again and again. Once a society decides a life can be offered, it stops being a desperate act and evolves into a system, and systems require managers. In China, at the final capital of the Shang Dynasty, archaeologists unearthed pits packed with skulls stacked in deliberate layers. Royal records carved into ox bones and turtle shells suggest over 13,000 people were sacrificed there across 2 centuries, an average of 50 lives per ritual. This wasn't chaos, it was a bureaucracy. High in the Andes, the Inca instituted the capacocha. Physically flawless children were dressed in fine textiles and marched for weeks toward 20,000-foot summits. Honored like royalty, fed coca leaves and maize beer, they were ultimately killed by a single blow at the peak. In 1995, a frozen 15-year-old girl was discovered on Mount Ampato, treated as precious until the exact second she wasn't. Mesopotamia, China, the Andes, Brazil, Sudan, Western Europe, civilizations separated by oceans, thousands of years, and lacking any shared gods, all reaching the exact same conclusion. Why? Because sacrifice was never truly about the gods, it was always about control. Whoever decides who must be sacrificed commands the fear of an entire population. Sacrifice provides an explanation for suffering, and in an unstable world, an explanation is pure power. A universe where terrible things happen for no reason is unbearable, but a universe where suffering has a cause and a price can be paid, even with a human life, is a universe that makes sense. That belief calcifies into tradition, and tradition becomes the undisputed reality of how the world operates. Which brings us back to that pit in Ur. It isn't an isolated horror, it is the culmination of a chain reaction that began thousands of years prior, fueled by an unexplainable drought, a ritual that seemed to work just once, and a relentless psychological need for control. Perhaps the real question isn't when the first sacrifice occurred. Perhaps it is how many different minds in how many disconnected corners of our planet independently arrived at the exact same terrifying answer to the exact same fear. What do you think that very first decision looked like? Let me know down in the comments. I read every single one. If decoding the darkest, most hidden corners of history completely changes the way you see the world, make sure to subscribe to Stickilo. We analyze the deepest mysteries of the human and animal mindset every single week.